Alright, welcome back to PacWest Bigfoot. Sorry guys, it's been a whole week since I've gotten something out here for you, but actually I was really ill for a few days there and ended up in the hospital for a day, so all things are better. I am doing good, feeling great actually, so that's pretty awesome. Wanted to let you know that April's giveaway is going to be a copy of the Minnesota Iceman, autographed by William Jevning, and I'll be announcing that between the 15th and the 20th of April, the winner. If you are not subscribed to PacWestBigfoot.com, get on over there, subscribe to the clan, and you can join on in and get in on the free giveaways. Also, if you guys would like to, greatly appreciate the donations that come through. Don't forget, I hope that this is kind of a monthly thing from some of you guys. It kind of keeps us floating around here, it keeps me going and everything else. I do have some interviews coming out this next week, some pretty awesome ones, and some more from some Forest Service people, employees and stuff, so it's going to be pretty awesome with that as we go along. Let me get a sip of the Sasquatch coffee real quick. And I wanted to give a little shout out to Monster X Radio this week. Thank you guys out there, Gunner, Monster X Radio and Sasquatch Coffee. Just thank you for the interview the week before last, and thank you again for letting me be a part of your web presence, because that's what I do online. So thank you guys very much. If you guys haven't heard anything, if you guys have not heard Monster X Radio, you need to get over there and listen to some of the awesome interviews and whatnot from Gunner and his cohorts. So it's pretty awesome. So let's get into this particular encounter story this week. This one actually comes from, this is a first... This is firsthand for me. I actually knew the individual personally, so let's get into it. Old Hermit tells about a scary Bigfoot encounter near California-Oregon border. This encounter story came to me firsthand by my late friend, the Goatman. Here is his Bigfoot encounter story that happened near the border of Oregon and Northern California in the late 1980s. This was a pretty scary incident, so much so he moved his hermit life from near the Colestin Valley over around the Mill Creek area and up to Grizzly Peak area weeks later after the incident. Here is his encounter, and just so you know, the Goatman was a friend of mine, an honest old hippie who never lied to anybody. He had no reason to. I got in touch with the Goatman about a year ago. I told him what I was up to with sharing out Bigfoot encounters and stories people had. I remember that he had his own, and it was rather scary, terrifying actually. Just so you know, the Goatman is an old hippie. Well, I'll let you let him tell you about himself and how he was nearly attacked by and ran off his little mountain by Bigfoot. I am the walrus. He is the Goatman. I moved to the southeast of Colestin Valley near the Oregon-California border around 1976. I was young, a hippie, and in love with a little red-haired girl named Autumn. I met her in Redondo Beach earlier that same winter, and after sparking up a couple, we talked all afternoon and evening on the beach about the beautiful Pacific Northwest. She mentioned she was from there originally, and I had visited a couple times and loved it as well. We decided to head to Wairika a few days later. Upon arriving there, we headed up to Ashland, Oregon, and we loved it. However, it was still a town, and we wanted to live wild, in the wilds, to be honest. Yes, we were those kinds of hippies. We camped out first just on the south side of Grizzly Peak. We were there for about a year, and between walking into town to get some social time in with locals and scouting out new places to live, we found one. We decided to head down the Pacific Crest Trail to, this would take us up near and over Mount Ashland. From there we spotted the Colestin Valley area, and to the southwest of that was forest, thick, green, beautiful Pacific Northwest forest as far as you could see. We hiked about 15 or so miles, it seemed, but it was not all that far. We could still just see Mount Ashland and, from some vantage points, Pilot Rock. We settled in. Here we would grow, yes, some weed to make money and be together for as long as we could, or were allowed, if you will. We were never bothered by a soul, nor did we see a Forest Service person or cop. We were left alone, completely alone, just nature and us. We lived there for 15 years until she, Autumn, got breast cancer and passed on at a pretty early age. But enough of the old days. Let me tell you what happened to me one time on the way back from town to our home in the woods. Autumn was here. Autumn was getting to that point that we thought there might be something seriously wrong with her. She was 40 years old, and I was 42 when she became ill. She had a bad cold at the time, and it lasted more than 2 to 3 days without her getting any better, so a trip to town would be made. I needed to get some medicine for her. Our stuff was not helping. It would take me about 22 hours to get there and back. Like I said, we were living near the border of California, about 15-20 miles from Ashland, the nearest town. This would take walking a trail that actually, and some people still know about it, takes you from southwest side of the mountain, over it and down smack into the top of Lithia Park. However, I would be derailed and almost killed, I believe, by a Bigfoot along the way. I moved rather quickly when I started my trek. I hated it when she was sick. It made me just sad. It would take me until early evening or late afternoon, at least, to get there from where I was. Thank goodness for the straight shot along the trail I mentioned. Otherwise, I would be walking all the way around the mountain, and that would take longer. Then again, maybe I should have. I made it to Ashland near about 7 to 8 p.m. that evening, I remember. Fortunately, Bi-Mart was still open, so I could load up on those chemically enhanced, man-made cold medications and concoctions we were trying to avoid. I grabbed 2 bags of cough drops, a fever reducer, and 2 bottles of that 44 stuff that was supposed to be like green moonshine in a bottle. I would also run into town, down to the plaza, and sell a little smoke to make my money back, plus some. It was not even 10 p.m. by the time I sold the bag and was ready to head back. I did not want to rest just yet. I was really worried about Autumn. This cold of hers seemed different, not your typical cold or fever. I ended up 3/4 the way up the mountain before the flight for my life would begin, however. These were the days when solar-powered flashlights existed, but only lasted about 10 minutes or so. Well, that was okay. It took batteries too, so I switched to those. I was coming around a particular bend when I felt a little off, or weirded out, if you will, man. I know, I smoke weed and paranoia is part of the high. Well, I was sober at this point, trust me. I smoked less than the college kids that bought it from me anyways. I felt as though I was being watched or followed. Walking, stalking, and shrieks. I never heard anything weird, nor had Autumn or I ever seen evidence of Bigfoot up until that time, and we lived up there by that point for years. But that does not mean that they were never around. Maybe they are or were from time to time, and they simply avoided us. Who knows? Either way, I was suddenly spooked when I started to hear something off in the woods, no more than maybe 30-40 yards away. It was walking along with me. That is what was weirding me out, man. I was not alone. I was being followed. I kept walking and even sped up a bit. I could still hear it as it still followed me. This was what was so creepy, dude. Whatever it was walking on 2 legs. I figured it could be some of those new forest people I'd been hearing about. If you don't know, these people are not like me and Autumn. These types of people are actually kind of reckless and dangerous and all-out mean. People like them should be avoided, always. Why they are mean and crazy, I don't know. Who am I to judge someone else? Either way, I thought perhaps I was going to be confronted by one or more of them. As I sped up and started to hit the first of 3 major inclines that would last for a few miles or so each, I could still hear the footsteps beside me about 30 or so yards in the thick of the trees following. And to tell you the truth, whoever it was at the time, they did not seem like they were trying to hide the fact either. I guess that is what got me, did. They did not care about the sound they were making. They knew I could hear them. I kept up the pace, and so did they. What I would know to be a Bigfoot eventually. I was starting to head down a hill as the trees opened up to an almost treeless mountainside, and the stars and the moon lit up a small little dip between the hill I was leaving and the next one I would be heading up. That is when the shrieks started. High-pitched screams I had never heard before, and ones that would put Sam Kinison to shame. It was loud, brother, loud and scary. I thought at first that a half lion, half hyena was loose, actually. That was until I thought it turned into a full-on laughing hyena. Creepy, I thought. It was something you would not want to hear when tripping out, I tell you. It let out a second scream, I remember, as I headed into the clearing and down the hill. I knew this trail like you know the streets you live on and around. By that time, I traveled them countless times. Not once did I hear or see anything like this before, but that does not mean they or it was never there. At that point in time, for some reason, it just wanted to be known or had a more nefarious idea in mind about me. I did not know. Either way, that second scream seemed like it stopped back where I was seconds before, as if the creature stopped before the open field below us. I turned to look, and that is when I saw something. Well, the outline of something enormous standing between two large trees. The $6 million Bigfoot. I don't remember if you recall that show, The $6 Million Man. Well, not that I am telling you that is what this thing looked like, that Bigfoot in the show, but it ran almost as fast as a $6 million man could, I believe. But first, let me just say this. My heart practically stopped when I saw the size of that outline swaying in the trees, and it was swaying just before it ran. Compared to the trees, I could tell you that this thing was at least 9 feet tall. At least 9 feet tall. Not kidding. I know, you think I am probably high right now, or then, but I'm not, and I was not. At that moment, my mind caught up with my situation. I still had a long way to go, and maybe a short time to get there, and what I saw next, well, that short time was running shorter than I thought. That creature, which I took to be a Bigfoot at that moment, bolted from one side of the open area to me, open area to below me in seconds, man. Seconds! Each stride had to be at least one of me, and I am 6 foot exactly. And I was right about that height. 9 feet tall was spot on, I thought. I could also tell by the light of the full moon that it was covered in hair because it flowed as he or she ran. I started to do the hustle at that point myself, and I knew that it knew I was there, and I had a feeling deep down that it was not a friendly creature. It was stalking me. I just knew it was. I made it into the trees and started up the second hill that I would need to climb. After that, a smaller one would be the last one between me, camp, and this Bigfoot thing. It kept crashing through the woods, screaming all the while, too. I could also hear it as it seemed to be snapping off limbs of trees as it walked. Well, actually, as it stalked me. I was huffing and puffing by that point, man, and my heart was pounding. However, as I felt my jacket pocket, I could feel the medication that Autumn needed, and I knew right then I needed to make it back to her. I started walking even faster. Some young folks today would call it speed walking, I suppose. I just call it scared as all get out walking. It still stayed about the same distance from me and the trail, I could tell. As I came to the end of that second climb, I was breathing hard and thanking the Almighty I was about to head downhill. I had to stop, though, just for a moment to catch my breath. I got to the open area at the top of the hill and stood still for about a moment or two. That thing stopped too, but this time I could sense it was closer to me, not as far as I thought it was before. Sticks and stoners hurt me. I was about to move again when a stick, a large limb more like it, came flying through the moonlit night from inside the line, in the tree line right at me. It landed right next to me, and that is because I moved. That thing tried to hit me with a large limb. I started to turn and pick up the pace again when all of a sudden I was charged. I have to tell you, I dove forward, rolling and getting up immediately to my feet and running. It literally sounded like it was crashing through the trees and brushed right at me, and so I reacted. I looked behind me and saw nothing at first. I got another 30 or 40 feet, looked again, and this time that thing sprinted again through the open area to the tree line ahead of me. However, this time I noticed it was closer, and it seemed as if it were trying to cut me off. I got to the tree line seconds later myself and stopped for a few seconds. I needed to know how close that thing was. I put my ear to the ground, as they say, and got real quiet. Nothing, not a sound from anything. I was scared as, well, I'll keep it clean here for you, but I was that scared all of a sudden. I pushed on, but this time at almost a slow jogging pace. Like I said, I knew this country, this trail, but I could not afford to hurt myself and fall and break bottles of cough medicine and so on. The last hill was in sight. I started to feel good, but that was short-lived. Just as all hope was felt, it vanished as a scream came from the left side of me that sent me almost crashing into a tree on the other side of the trail. The creature was close, like 15 to 20 yards close. I gathered myself quickly and felt around for anything I could protect myself with. A large, broken, dead limb was all I could find. Oh, and a rock, I recall. I threw the rock into the woods and started running again. This time I was running like the forest guy in that movie, you know, Run, Forrest, Run. As I did, I watched while another large limb came flying out from the trees and hitting me in the shoulder. It hurt, but it was more like a Charlie horse, you know. But it hit me nonetheless, slowing me down. Another scream and the crashing through the woods came again. I could feel the earth beneath me, man. It was vibrating more than a Jamaican to some great music. It was close, and it wanted me. It was at that moment I felt like I was in trouble, serious trouble. Fast was not the word. I was running faster than I had since I was 10 years old, I tell you. I ran and ran so fast I was heading up the other hill before I knew it. Prefontaine had nothing on me that night, dude. As I ran, I could hear that thing to the right of me, running and hollering at me. So far, though, and I knew it could catch me at any time if it wanted, but it hadn't. It just ran beside me, shadowing me. But I have to tell you, I think if this was to go on longer than it did at that point, I think it would have. I really think I was being hunted down and simply being toyed with up to that point. Like a cat with a mouse, I felt I was being played with before a certain execution. Home at last. Praise the Lord, I am home at last. It usually takes almost all day to get back, but with all that running for my life, well, I was running through the last mile before the sun was even peeking or looking to peek over the mountains. However, that thing was still there, still following me, and every time I stopped, it would stop and immediately charge me through the brush and trees. It would come within yards of me, so close in fact I got a good look during that last stretch of trail. It looked angry, mad, its eyes were squinty, small, and dark. It looked like, well, I'm not sure what to compare it to other than a large ape, a two-legged ape that stood at least 3 or more heads above me. It had a small mouth that at that point was a kind of cringing shape. It was hairy, but I could not really tell if it was dark brown or black. It was still too dark at that point to tell the color. It was huffing or breathing real heavy as it stood there. Before I could look away and start the quick pace up again, this thing let out a scream that even Autumn heard from that far away. She would ask me when I entered camp minutes later what it was. It was loud, so loud I covered my ears, turned, and literally started to run for my life. It was about 15 minutes later, and I finally saw the light of day coming up out of the east, and I could see a campfire through the trees ahead of me. I was home at last. Autumn comes and goes. Scared, but never scared enough to move to town. That was how I felt, and Autumn told me she heard that last scream, and it made her shudder a bit. We decided to move, and not just because of that incident, but because the screaming continued for as long as we were there. Every night in the distance we could hear that thing, the Bigfoot scream and holler, and we felt like it was directed at us. We moved, and it took a few trips to get everything as we moved southeast of Ashland, just over the other side of Grizzly Peak again. It was not long after that Autumn would learn she had cancer, and soon, one fall morning, I took her to the hospital where she would not last a week. We were told the interesting stories of our adventures, and especially the Bigfoot incident, and how she really was scared for me over those last few days. Autumn slipped away into the universe, and I back into the wilds. I've never heard or seen anything like it since that time. Since the move, at least. Nor do I wish to. I love nature, man. But sometimes, what is out there, well, it's not so nice, I think, after all. Thanks, your universal being, Goatman.